There comes a moment when all the world holds its breath. The moon bleeds red, darkness contorts, and whispers long-forgotten stir beneath the night. This is the dark hour, a time when light shudders and fate calls out from the void. Come closer, because once you step through, there is no escape. Welcome to the Dark Hour Pan. Chapter 6. The Lifeblood, the Phosphorescent Grove. No path leads to this forest. No hunter dares set foot within its bounds, and no map records its existence. They call it the Whispering Woods, a place forgotten by time, nestled between the highest peaks of the Carpathian Mountains. The light here is not granted by the sun, but woven from the ceaseless life of the forest itself. It glitters in the silver mist that perpetually lingers beneath the ancient canopy. It seeps from bell-shaped flowers like azure lanterns. It flows in streams of liquid gold lichen down the bark of trees. The wind that slips through the leaves makes no rustling sound, but rather a drifting melodic harmony, like the song of an unseen choir. Within the symphony of life, one can sometimes hear a lilting giggle, clear as wind chimes, from tiny sprites of light, and sometimes the gentle huffing breath of creatures with fur as soft as new moss, hidden in the hollows of trees. And when a silent figure passes, all these sounds transform. The silver mist parts, forging a path for her. The playful sprites cease their games and flock to her, orbiting her like miniature stars greeting their moon. The gentle creatures bow their heads from afar. Daphne moves lightly over the soft moss, her bare feet leaving no trace. She is the heart of this forest, and the forest is her soul. When she glides her hand over the bark of an ancient tree, a warm pulse of light radiates from it in response. She is its keeper, not by command, but by communion. But today, the forest's melody is marred by a sorrowful note. The pulse of life she always felt was faint. She kneels beside a tree trunk, where a cluster of bluebell flowers struggles to glow. Clinging to their roots is a different kind of moss, a gray-black, slimy, and cold growth. It drains the light and life from the flowers. Daphne gently touches the diseased patch, a frigid and hostile sensation seeping into her fingers. She recoils, her delicate features tightening with worry. "It spreads too fast," she whispers. She rises and walks faster, heading for the heart of the forest. It is a vast clearing, one that even the great trees dare not encroach upon, not out of fear, but out of reverence. In the center of the clearing, a colossal being lies in repose. It is not a dragon of flesh and bone. Its body is formed from the gnarled roots of ancient trees. Its scales are stone slabs covered in phosphorescent moss, and its horns are two ancient oak branches reaching for the sky. It is the guardian, the living embodiment of the forest itself. Its breath is the morning mist, and the beat of its heart is the rhythm of the seasons. But now its breath is heavy and labored. The light from the moss on its body is dim, and in several places, those same patches of gray-black decay have begun to appear. Daphne approaches, pressing her cheek against the creature's cold stone scales. "My friend," she says softly, "you are in pain." The great dragon merely opens its eyes. They are two deep pools of water, reflecting a millennium of weariness. This bark magic is a poison, slowly seeping into the lifeblood of the forest. Daphne can only slow it down. She cannot heal it. She feels helpless. But then, something unexpected happens. The guardian suddenly lifts its head. Its enormous eyes look not at Daphne, but down into the earth. as if listening to a tremor from deep, deep below. A pure silver sliver of light, a light utterly different from the magic of the forest, flickers across the moss on its body. Daphne feels it too. A faint wave of energy, weak but full of life and hope, has just touched the roots of the forest, like a single drop of cool water on parched land. Where did it come from? For the first time after months of despair, Daphne feels a new emotion: curiosity. The stream of light. At the stream of light, the air was thick with the weight of Silas's final words. But perhaps you can. The sentence hung amidst the sound of trickling water, heavy as a millstone. All eyes fell upon Pan, not with admiration, but with a mixture of doubt, pity, and desperate hope. The boy had fought monsters, had led them through the darkness, and now the burden of an entire sacred place was being laid upon his young shoulders. Pan stared at the gray-black scar in the heart of the stream, then looked down at his own hands. These were hands accustomed to the hilt of a sword, calloused from practice, not the soft hands of a healer. He could feel the wild power of his father coursing through his veins, but it was a power of destruction, of claw and fang. And his mother's light? It was a distant memory, a feeling of warmth, not a tool he could command. "Silas, what are you saying?" Elara was the first to speak, her voice sharp and pragmatic. "He is a warrior, not a sorcerer. You cannot ask a child to do the impossible." "This boy's magic lies not in incantations or rituals, but in his blood," Silas answered, his eyes never leaving Pan. "It is the balance of two worlds, pure light and wild life. Even that dark magic recognizes it. It recoils when you draw near." "I don't know what to do," Pan said honestly, his voice trailing off. "Don't do anything," Silas said, his tone softening. "Feel. This place is a living thing. It is wounded and it is crying for help. Touch it, Pan. Don't use force. Listen to it. Listen with both halves of who you are." Pan swallowed hard. He glanced at Elara, catching a rare look of concern in her eyes. He looked at Tomas, who gave him an encouraging nod. Finally, he looked at the little girl, Lena, who was watching him with absolute innocent faith. For her, he had to try. He took a deep breath, stepped to the water's edge, and knelt. Pushing aside his doubts and fears, he slowly lowered his hand, reaching for the heart of the magical scar. The witch's curse. The moment his fingers touched the tainted water, a bone-deep chill, thick with death and despair, invaded him. Visions of decay, of a creeping darkness gnawing at the roots of life, flashed through his mind. Pan gritted his teeth, nearly pulling his hand back. Silas's words echoed in his head. He no longer fought the cold. Instead, he closed his eyes, letting it wash over him as he focused inward. He called for his mother, and a familiar warmth began to spread from his heart. He embraced the fury of his father, and a raw, primal energy began to flow through his veins. Light and life, warmth and wildness. They did not conflict, they merged. But as Pan's light touched the core of the wound, the darkness within did not simply vanish. It shrieked in silence and coalesced into a consciousness. From the psychic mire, a figure arose, a woman, but only the desiccated husk of one. Her skin was stretched like thin parchment over a skeletal frame, and beneath it, veins pulsed not with blood, but with a black ichor thick as tar. Her hair was a tangle of dead, dry roots that reached out like grasping claws. And her eyes, they were two empty pits, yet from them spilled a sickening violet light, like the venom of some ancient spider. Morwen. She did not smile with her mouth, for her lips were cracked and sealed against her blackened gums. Her smile was a facial convulsion that caused her parchment skin to split, oozing more of the black fluid. And from that fissure, a torrent of horrific images poured forth, drowning Pan's mind. He saw a village engulfed in flames. Blood wolves, massive and ferocious, swarmed through the streets. One wolf's jaws snapped a defending soldier's arm with a dry crack of bone. Another ripped open the chest of a screaming woman with its terrible maw. The vision did not stop there. Pan was forced to witness them begin their feast upon the battlefield. The wet sounds of tearing flesh and crunching bone, a gruesome symphony amidst the cries and the roaring fire. The image shifted. He saw Lucas. He wasn't in battle, but standing in a circle of dead knights in silver armor. He knelt, grabbed a fallen knight by the hair, and tilted his head back. Lucas bent down, and Pan saw him bite into the man's throat, ravenously drinking the last of his blood. Fresh crimson stained his chin and neck. When Lucas looked up, in the vision, his eyes met Pan's. A savage, blood-soaked smile stretched across his lips, a silent mockery for his weak, half-breed brother. Morwen's specter reappeared, and a voice like nails scraping a tombstone echoed in Pan's mind. That is power, you foolish boy. The power of pure blood, not your tainted, diluted filth. You think you can heal? You are nothing but a stain. Now, behold the future of those you call friends. The little girl, Lena, her face streaked with dry tears, appeared in his mind. Then the images of Ilara, Tomas, and even Silas all turned into statues of white bone, shattered at the witch's feet. Pan felt his heart seize. The fear and despair Morwen projected sought to drown him, to make him a part of the very darkness that was consuming the stream. He nearly gave in, nearly accepted death, accepted failure. No! A snarl erupted in his mind, not Morwen's, but the snarl of a wolf, the survival instinct from the father he had never known. He saw a flicker of light, not the light of the stream, but a light that flared from deep within him, from the place where his mother had given him life and hope. He no longer called upon his mother or father separately. He fused them. The wild strength was not just for fighting, but for protecting. The light was not just for guidance, but for warmth and healing. He clenched his fist, driving Morwen's horrific images away. Her darkness shrieked in silence, as if burned by his nascent light. Her skeletal face contorted in rage, and then dissolved like toxic smoke. A glimmer of hope. Pan gasped, snatching his hand from the water as if he'd been scalded. He staggered backward, utterly spent. Ilara and Tomas rushed to support him. Everyone stared in stunned silence at the stream. The gray-black scar had been pushed back, if only by a little, but it was no longer spreading. At the very spot Pan had touched, a pure silver ripple remained, pulsing like a newly revived heart. Silas looked at the scene, then at Pan, who was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. For the first time, a small, hopeful smile touched his weathered face. "It worked," he said, his voice raspy. "The lifeblood has found its healer."
The witch's curse. The moment his fingers touched the tainted water, a bone-deep chill, thick with death and despair, invaded him. Visions of decay, of a creeping darkness gnawing at the roots of life, flashed through his mind. Pan gritted his teeth, nearly pulling his hand back. "Listen," Silas's words echoed in his head. He no longer fought the cold. Instead, he closed his eyes, letting it wash over him as he focused inward. He called for his mother, and a familiar warmth began to spread from his heart. He embraced the fury of his father, and a raw, primal energy began to flow through his veins. Light and life, warmth and wildness. They did not conflict, they merged. But as Pan's light touched the core of the wound, the darkness within did not simply vanish. It shrieked in silence and coalesced into a consciousness. From the psychic mire, a figure arose, a woman, but only the desiccated husk of one. Her skin was stretched like thin parchment over a skeletal frame, and beneath it, veins pulsed not with blood, but with a black ichor thick as tar. Her hair was a tangle of dead, dry roots that reached out like grasping claws. And her eyes? They were two empty pits, yet from them spilled a sickening violet light, like the venom of some ancient spider. Morwen. She did not smile with her mouth, for her lips were cracked and sealed against her blackened gums. Her smile was a facial convulsion that caused her parchment skin to split, oozing more of the black fluid. And from that fissure, a torrent of horrific images poured forth, drowning Pan's mind. He saw a village engulfed in flames. Blood wolves, massive and ferocious, swarmed through the streets. One wolf's jaws snapped a defending soldier's arm with a dry crack of bone. Another ripped open the chest of a screaming woman with its terrible maw. The vision did not stop there. Pan was forced to witness them begin their feast upon the battlefield, the wet sounds of tearing flesh and crunching bone, a gruesome symphony amidst the cries and the roaring fire. The image shifted. He saw Lucas. He wasn't in battle, but standing in a circle of dead knights in silver armor. He knelt, grabbed a fallen knight by the hair, and tilted his head back. Lucas bent down, and Pan saw him bite into the man's throat, ravenously drinking the lust of his blood. Fresh crimson stained his chin and neck. When Lucas looked up, in the vision, his eyes met Pan's. A savage, blood-soaked smile stretched across his lips, a silent mockery for his weak half-breed brother. Morwen's specter reappeared, and a voice like nails scraping a tombstone echoed in Pan's mind. "That is power, you foolish boy. The power of pure blood, not your tainted, diluted filth. You think you can heal? You are nothing but a stain. Now, behold the future of those you call friends." The little girl, Lena, her face streaked with dry tears, appeared in his mind. Then the images of Ilara, Tonus, and even Silas all turned into statues of white bone, shattered at the witch's feet. Pan felt his heart seize. The fear and despair Morwen projected sought to drown him, to make him a part of the very darkness that was consuming the stream. He nearly gave in, nearly accepted death, accepted failure. No! A snarl erupted in his mind, not Morwen's, but the snarl of a wolf, the survival instinct from the father he had never known. He saw a flicker of light, not the light of the stream, but a light that flared from deep within him, from the place where his mother had given him life and hope. He no longer called upon his mother or father separately. He fused them. The wild strength was not just for fighting, but for protecting. The light was not just for guidance, but for warmth and healing. He clenched his fist, driving Morwen's horrific images away. Her darkness shrieked in silence, as if burned by his nascent light. Her skeletal face contorted in rage and then dissolved like toxic smoke. A glimmer of hope. Pan gasped, snatching his hand from the water as if he'd been scalded. He staggered backward, utterly spent. Ilara and Thomas rushed to support him. Everyone stared in stunned silence at the stream. The gray-black scar had been pushed back, if only by a little, but it was no longer spreading. At the very spot Pan had touched, a pure silver ripple remained, pulsing like a newly revived heart. Silas looked at the scene, then at Pan, who was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. For the first time, a small, hopeful smile touched his weathered face. "It worked," he said, his voice raspy. "The lifeblood has found its healer."
The sanctum of shadows. There were no windows in this place. The air was thick, cold, and smelled of dark magic that had festered for centuries. The only light in the vast circular chamber emanated from eerie purple veins that snaked across the black stone floor, all converging in the center. There, hovering over a stone dais, was an obsidian orb, but it did not reflect light, it devoured it. A sphere of pure darkness, and within it, silent, tormented faces seemed to swirl in an eternal nightmare. Morwen stood before the orb, her skeletal hands hovering over its polished surface. Her eyes were closed, but her mind was reaching out across hundreds of miles to the malignant scar she had inflicted upon the lifeblood of the Carpathian Mountains. She was savoring its slow decay like a connoisseur savoring a rare wine. Lucas stood in the shadows behind her, watching in silence. He hated his mother's patience. He wanted to act, to hunt, to stain his sword with the blood of the one he believed had defiled their lineage. Her absolute concentration was suddenly shattered by an unnatural tremor. The dark orb shook violently. A piercing, acidic shriek echoed from within. And then, across its pitch-black surface, several faint but resilient silver streaks of light erupted like lightning, trying to tear the night apart. "Ah!" Morwen hissed, a dry, grating sound like two tombstones grinding together. She snatched her hands back as if burned. The orb shuddered one last time and went still. The streaks of light vanished, but its surface was no longer perfectly black. It bore several faint hairline cracks, like a precious gem that had been flawed. "Mother, what is it?" Lucas throwed from the shadows, his hand already on the hilt of his sword. Morwen turned, the malevolent purple light in her eye sockets glaring with rage. "That half-breed," she snarled, her voice a sibilant whisper. "He has reached the lifeblood." Lucas was stunned. Impossible. The place is hidden. Gronach reported they vanished into the mountain. He had a guide, a traitor from the old order, Morwen said, her mind rapidly piecing events together. But how he got there is not the issue. The issue is that he is resisting my curse. He is trying to heal the lifeblood. Fury ignited in Lucas's eyes. "The whelp dares! Let me go, Mother. I will lead an army into that mountain, find him and—" "Silence," Morwen snapped, her voice cold as ice. Her initial rage was quickly being replaced by venomous calculation. "You will go nowhere. A beast knows only brute force. We use our minds." She turned back to the flawed orb, and a hideous smile once again made her desiccated skin twitch. "He is trying to heal, which means he is trying to connect with the power of the lifeblood from within," she mused to herself.
And to do that, he must weaken the ancient magical seal, the seal that hides that place from us. She looked at Lucas, her purple eyes glowing malevolently. He is opening the door for us, my son. He will be the one to break the seal from the inside. We simply need to apply a little pressure. Morwen turned toward the exit of the sanctum. Gronok and his wolves cannot tear through solid rock, but other things can. She raised a bony finger to her lips and produced an acidic, whistling note, a sound not meant for human ears. From the deep shadows of the fortress, a scraping, grinding sound and the low growl of something very, very large echoed in response. "We are sending Gronok a new toy," she said, her smile widening. "Something that can dig."
The accusation. Pan opened his eyes, his breathing still slightly ragged, but his mind was strangely at peace. The warmth of the valley and the resolute image of Daphne in the phosphorescent grove were still vivid. He looked down at the stream. The gray-black scar had visibly shrunken, and the silver light he had created had now spread out like a blooming flower, pulsing with a gentle, living rhythm. You did it," Tomas stammered, his eyes wide with astonishment. The remaining soldiers looked at Pan with a sense of awe. Ilara came forward and knelt beside Pan, not as a commander, but as a comrade. She looked at his face, still beaded with sweat. "Are you all right?" "I'm all right," Pan nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "More than all right. I understand now." Silas drew near, the hard lines of his face seeming to have softened. "You did more than push back the curse, Pan. You spoke with the lifeblood. You reminded it of its true nature." He looked at the spreading silver ripple. "But it is still weak. The wound runs deep. It will take much time." "We have time," Ilara said, standing up. "This place is safe. We can make camp and protect Pan while he recovers and continues. This place is not as safe as you think." The voice, clear and cold, made the entire group jump. Ilara spun around, her silver whip ready. Silas instinctively raised his lyre, and Tomas and the soldiers immediately formed a circle, shielding Lena and Pan. From behind a giant glowing mushroom, Daphne emerged. She looked exactly as she had in Pan's vision, her hair braided with moss, her clothes made of leaves, and her wild green eyes. But now, her eyes also held a deep weariness and a profound sadness. Her gaze swept over the group, pausing on Pan with a flash of recognition, before finally locking onto Silas. "Betrayer," she said, her voice devoid of hatred, containing only a heavy, crushing disappointment. "You've returned to the grave you abandoned." Silas was frozen. "Daphne, you're truly alive." "I am alive because I did not run," Daphne countered. "I stayed here. I watched the lifeblood die a slow death from the wound your kind inflicted, while you lived a hermit's life in the world above." "I had no choice," Silas growled, the pain of the past stark in his eyes. "Everyone was dead. I couldn't fight them alone." "So you bring more outsiders here?" Daphne gestured to the group, bringing their weapons, their wars, and their fear into this final sanctum. "Don't you see? The very connection that boy just made has caused the seal of this place to tremble. It pushed back the darkness, yes, but it also sent out a beacon, letting them know that something in here is fighting back." Daphne's words were a bucket of ice water on the group's nascent hope. Pan realized it with a jolt of horror. The light he had created to heal was also a lighthouse in the dark, attracting the enemy's attention. 'Tis 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 '
Chapter 7: The Betrayer. Daphne's accusation hung in the air, sharp as shards of ice. Ilara and the others watched the tension between the last two keepers, feeling like outsiders to a tragedy that had spanned decades. Silas did not answer Daphne's charge. He slowly turned his back on them all and walked to the edge of the stream. He looked down at his own distorted reflection on the water's surface, where silver light and a gray-black stain wrestled for dominance. "She's right," he said softly, his voice hoarse and weary. "It's my fault. It's all my fault." He closed his eyes, not to escape reality, but to immerse himself in a past that was forever lost. And for a moment, the dark and tense cavern vanished. Memory carried him back to a time when the stream of light was known by its true name, the Starlit River. The surface of the lifeblood then bore no scar. It was a perfect mirror, and reflected upon it was not the image of the cavern's ceiling, but of a night sky full of stars. Thousands, tens of thousands of stars glittered on the water, forming the familiar constellations of the world above, as well as strange new ones that belonged only to this place. Their light was not cold, but warm, and it mingled with the green glow of divine moss and gardens of phosphorescent flora, creating a symphony of color. It was not just a cave, but a small city, a sanctum of knowledge and peace. Bridges woven from living roots crossed the Starlit River. Dwellings were carved into the rock walls, their architecture mimicking the flow of water without a single sharp angle. And the people who lived there, the keepers of the source, they were not warriors. They were monks, scholars, artists, and astronomers. They wore simple ivory white robes, and every face radiated a serene tranquility. They worshipped no gods, for they believed divinity lay within the lifeblood itself, in the dance of the stars upon the water. Silas saw himself again, much younger, sitting on a rock beside the old elder. The elder, his silver beard reaching his chest, was pointing down at the Starlit River. "Look, Silas," his voice was as gentle as the flowing stream. "Today, the constellation of the hunting lion shines brightest. The world above is having a bountiful harvest. Our lifeblood and the pulse of the earth are one, my son. As long as the stars shine here, the world above will have hope." The young Silas had then plucked a cheerful tune on his lyre, and the music blended into the air, causing the nearby bellflowers to tremble and glow even brighter. The laughter of his other brothers echoed from the terraced gardens. It was a civilization of light and harmony, a great heritage. A sudden, jarring note ripped through the memory, tearing apart the peaceful melody. The roar of the blood wolves, the crimson of fire and blood, the image of the old elder falling, his blood staining the stars on the water red, the savage laughter of the young wolf leader. The memory shattered. Silas opened his eyes. The starry sky was gone. All that remained was the silver water struggling against a gray-black scar. All that remained was silence and loss. He turned to face the group, and this time he no longer avoided Daphne's gaze. In his gray eyes now was not only pain, but the full weight of a fallen world. "I will tell you," he said, his voice trembling but clear, "about the day the stars were extinguished." He began to speak, and as he did, the space around them seemed to blur, giving way to the vivid images of his memory. The alarm sounded like a lost note in our eternal symphony, Silas's voice echoed, distant. The blood wolves had found the entrance. They poured in like a black flood, bringing fire and bloodlust. We fought. We were not warriors, but we fought to protect our home. Pan and the others could see the scene. The monks in their ivory robes, holding wooden staves and gardening tools, bravely standing against massive monsters with jaws full of sharp teeth. My last memory of the elder is of him falling right at the edge of the starlit river, Silas continued, his voice breaking. His blood, the blood of the purest keeper, stained the stars on the water red. But that was not the worst part. Death was not the worst part. The moment his blood merged with the lifeblood, it became a key, a conduit for a magic far more terrible than mere violence. From the void, a voice arose, a woman's voice, cold and full of hatred, echoing throughout the sanctum. It was Morwen. In Silas's vision, Pan saw the water turn from just red. A gray-black color began to spread from where the elder's blood had fallen, like a toxic ink. The glittering stars on the starlit river began to flicker, then winked out one by one. The phosphorescent flowers withered in an instant. The entire civilization of light was being drained of its life. She cast a curse, Silas whispered, the horror of that moment still etched into his voice. A curse of decay, of oblivion. She cursed that which was once light would become darkness. That which was once hope would become despair. She cursed that the lifeblood would never be healed, that it would die a slow, agonizing death over centuries. I saw my brothers fall not only from their wounds, I saw them fall because their hope was stolen. The light in their eyes died long before their hearts stopped beating. Before the elder drew his last breath, he used all his remaining strength to push me away, to teleport me from this place. His final command was live and remember. I have lived, and I have remembered. I remember watching my home die, not by the fangs of wolves, but by the venomous whisper of a witch. Silas finished his story. He stood there, no longer a mysterious guide, but a survivor carrying the tragedy of an entire civilization. Now the group truly understood. The gray-black scar in the stream was not just a wound. It was a curse. "It's a curse," Pan said, almost shouting. His voice, filled with a sudden fierce resolve, radiated through the group. It was no longer a hope born of blindness, but a conscious choice. Ilara nodded decisively. "All right, but we will not sit here and wait for them. If a battle is inevitable, we will give them a welcome they will never forget." She turned to Silas and Daphne. "You two know this place best. Where are the weaknesses? What can we use to our advantage? What's the plan? Pan heals and we fight?"
The first lesson. The tension in the sanctum still lingered, but it was now replaced by an atmosphere of urgent resolve. By consensus, Pan and Daphne moved together toward the center of the stream, where Morwen's magical scar was most vivid. "Your energy is strong," Daphne began, her young voice clear but serious. "I can feel it, but it is chaotic, like a waterfall. If you keep shoving it into the lifeblood like that, you will create massive echoes." She paused, looking Pan straight in the eye. "We need a current, not a flood." Pan nodded in understanding. "But I don't know any other way. I only know how to fight." "Then today you will learn to listen," Daphne replied. She pointed to the water. "Kneel. This time, don't try to change anything, just listen." Pan obeyed. He knelt at the water's edge, his reflection distorted on the warring surface of silver and shadow. "Close your eyes," Daphne commanded softly.
Stop seeing with your eyes. Feel with the blood that flows in your veins. Morwen's curse is like a constant, piercing shriek. But beneath that shriek, the lifeblood is still whispering its melody. It is very faint, but it is there. Listen, can you hear it? Pan closed his eyes. At first, all he felt was the hostile cold of the curse, the horrific images of Morwen threatening to rise again. He almost flinched back by reflex. Be calm, Daphne's voice was a guiding thread in the darkness. Don't fear it. Acknowledge its presence, like you would acknowledge the noise of a storm. Then listen deeper through the storm. Pan took a deep breath. Following her words, he no longer resisted the malevolence of the curse. He let it wash over his mind and focused on what lay beneath. And then he heard it. It was not a sound, but a feeling. A gentle vibration, somber, yet impossibly resilient. Like the faint beat of a colossal sleeping heart. It was the melody of life, of light, of the stars that had been extinguished. It was there, drowned out by the shriek of the curse, but it was not silent. I feel it, Pan whispered, his eyes still tightly shut. Good, Daphne said. Now try to touch the water. Don't send a waterfall. Send a single note of your own, in harmony with the melody you just heard. Let your blood sing with it. Pan hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered his hand. Instead of feeling the biting cold, this time he focused entirely on that melody. He let the warmth from his mother and the wild strength from his father merge into one, not to attack, but to sing. A small ripple spread from his fingertips as they touched the water. There was no explosion of light, only a small circle of pure, stable, and peaceful silver formed around his hand. The circle did not violently push the darkness back. It gently purified it, transforming a small patch of murky gray water back into pristine, clear silver. Pan opened his eyes, staring in amazement at the result. He felt tired, but not exhausted like before. Daphne gave a slight nod, a rare glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. That is a start. You have learned how to whisper. Now rest. We will need you to do this many, many times. The Survivor's Strategy. While Pan and Daphne focused on the spiritual war against the curse, Ilara returned to the role she performed best, that of a commander. She could not fight magic, but she could fight the tangible, and she was certain a tangible enemy was fast approaching. Silas, she called, her voice decisive and unwavering. I need you. Show me this entire place, every passage, every cavern, every bridge. I need to know if we're standing in a fortress or a death trap. Silas, having rediscovered a piece of his purpose, nodded. Follow me. Together they began their survey. Tomas and the two remaining soldiers followed, weapons at the ready. Ilara moved with the intense focus of a stalking leopard. She didn't see the sanctum's mystical beauty, she saw it through a tactical lens. That root bridge, she said, pointing to a narrow bridge spanning the starlit river. How much weight can it hold? Is it easily destroyed? It is very strong, Silas replied. It is part of the lifeblood. But if you focus an attack on the main joints, it will collapse. It could make a perfect choke point. Good, Ilara murmured, committing it to memory. They moved deeper into the side tunnels. Silas showed her walls thick with divine moss. This moss, he explained, will flare with a blinding light if a strong source of dark energy comes near. They were our early warning system. A warning system, Ilara repeated, an idea sparking in her mind. So if the enemy comes from the main entrance, we'll know immediately. She stopped at a fork in the tunnel. One path led back to the main garden, the other deeper into darkness. "Where does this lead?" "Nowhere," Silas said. "It's a dead end, but the rock face there is weak. We used it to quarry minerals." Ilara stepped inside, tapping her knuckles against the rock wall. She turned back to Silas, a newfound respect for the man forming in her eyes. She had once seen him as an eccentric hermit, but now she saw his profound knowledge. "You have the knowledge," she stated. Silas looked back at her, seeing in turn the sharp mind and meticulous preparation of a seasoned warrior. "And you have the strategy," he replied. The keepers were so focused on peace that they forgot how to protect it. "I am glad you are here." That brief understanding forged a solid alliance. Ilara turned to Tomas. "Tomas, you and the other two, use these loose rocks here and reinforce the entrance to this dead-end tunnel. No need to build a wall, just create an obstruction that can be collapsed if needed. We'll turn it into a trap." "Yes, Commander," Tomas replied, grateful for a concrete task. The three soldiers immediately set to work, the sound of shifting stones beginning to echo in the quiet space. The sound of preparation, of resistance. Ilara and Silas continued on, mapping out a defense for a battle they knew was certain to come. The calm before the storm. After the plans had been laid and everyone had their tasks, a different kind of silence fell upon the sanctum. It was not the silence of tension or fear, but the quiet of acceptance and preparation. Tomas sat on a stone slab by the stream, watching over Lena. The little girl, having grown accustomed to the place, was curiously prodding the glowing pebbles in the clear water with a small twig. Her soft giggles were the only pure sound in the cavern. Tomas smiled and took a small, crudely but carefully carved wooden bird from his pocket. He had made it during their rest. "This is for you, Lena," he said softly. The girl turned, her wide eyes growing larger when she saw the gift. She timidly took the wooden bird, clutching it to her chest. "Where I'm from," Tomas said, his voice distant, "they believe wooden birds bring sweet dreams to children." He didn't say it aloud, but in his heart he was praying that this child, who had lost everything, would still have sweet dreams to dream. In another corner, near the most tainted part of the lifeblood, Pan was meditating. He wasn't trying to heal, but simply resting his fingertips on the water's surface, closing his eyes, and listening as Daphne had instructed. He could feel the dull ache of the curse, but beneath it, he could also feel a faint hope responding to him, a gratitude from the ancient entity. He was no longer a child pushed about by fate. He had accepted his role. Near the main entrance, Ilara sat on a boulder, meticulously cleaning and inspecting each silver blade on her whip. Her face was a mask of concentration. Every movement was precise, efficient, without a single wasted motion. It was the ritual of a warrior before battle, a way to make the mind as sharp as the weapon. And Silas sat on a higher ledge, his old lyre resting across his lap. He did not play a full song, he just plucked a single, low, resonant note. It was not a sad melody, nor was it a battle hymn. It was the sound of resolve, the sound of a guardian who had returned to his post. Each to their own task, each to their own thoughts, but all united by a single determination. They were ready. The betrayer. Meanwhile, in the world outside, a cold night enveloped the base of the mountain. Grolnok's camp was a chaotic mess of mud, crudely erected hide tents, and the thick, coppery stench of blood. The Blood Wolf leader was pacing back and forth in frustration, his claws scraping against the frozen ground. Suddenly, the growling fell silent. Grolnok's personal guards simultaneously bowed their heads, a mixture of fear and reverence in their eyes. Grolnok turned. A figure stood there, as silent as if he had always been there. He was not as massive as Grolnok, but he radiated an aura of lethal authority. He wore exquisite black armor, engraved with the sigil of a wolf howling at the moon, and a long scar ran across his handsome but cold face through his left eye. This was Fenrir, Morwen's general, and once the captain of Pan's father's personal guard. Behind him, the ground trembled. A massive, hideous creature crawled up from a magical fissure. It was a grotesque fusion of a giant worm and a scorpion, with an armor of black chitin and 6 digging legs as large as scythes. "A gift from the queen," Fenrir said, his voice deep and emotionless. "It will clear the way for you." Grolnok bowed his head lower. "Lord Fenrir." "Tear this mountain apart," Fenrir commanded. "Find the lifeblood. Raze it to the ground. Leave nothing alive." The digging monster shrieked, a piercing sound, and then charged at the cliff face. The sound of shattering rock and trembling earth echoed through the valley. Grolnok looked up, but Fenrir was already gone. He only heard the general's last words carried on the wind. "I am going inside. There is an old debt to be settled." Inside the stream of light, the strategic discussion was in full swing. Ilara was scratching a makeshift defensive map on the ground. Silas pointed out secret tunnels that could be used for ambushes, while Daphne explained the flow of the lifeblood's energy. Pan sat in the middle, listening, his heart pounding with a new determination. They were a single, united front. Suddenly, from the very shadows of the entrance they had used, a voice cut through everything. The sacrifice of those monks was admirable, but also utterly pointless, wasn't it, Silas? The group jumped, instantly assuming battle stances. From the darkness, Fenrir casually strode forth. He showed no signs of having had to fight his way in. Silas froze, his face draining of color, as he recognized the sigil on the man's armor. The sigil of the Wolf Guard, the prince's personal guard. Daphne snarled, furious. "Who are you? How do you know of this place?" Fenrir didn't even glance at her. His cold eyes swept over Pan, a flicker of recognition in them. He looked at Silas. "I always wondered where you ran off to. So you've been hiding in this hole." "Why?" Silas stammered. "You were the one the prince trusted most." Fenrir smirked, a smile devoid of any warmth. "I know of this place because I was the one who told Morwen about it." A dead silence fell over them. The confession was even more shocking than Silas's tragic story. Fenrir finally looked directly at Pan. His eyes were as cold as the harshest winter. "Because your prince was weak," he said, his voice clear and laced with contempt. "He allowed his love for a human to defile the pure bloodline. I only did what was necessary to cleanse that stain."
And so our chapter for tonight comes to a close. Our characters once again stand before daunting challenges, and the light of hope, however faint, has never been extinguished. They will need to rest to prepare for the battle ahead, just as we do. As each day passes, perhaps every one of us faces our own battles. There are times of exhaustion, times of uncertainty amidst the darkness of worries and sorrows. But you see, just as Pan found the light within himself, the night is not always something to be feared. It is the necessary silence for us to recover, to heal, and to let beautiful dreams lead the way. Thank you for listening and for joining the Dark Hour today. If the story touched you, please leave a like to spread this light. And don't forget to subscribe so we don't lose each other in the next chapter. For now, let go of all your worries. I wish you a deep sleep and truly peaceful dreams. Good night.